is at the age of 34. 10 years later, Annie was attacked at home. Initially, she placed her hopes for rescue in her neighbors. However, to her surprise, no matter how hard she cried for help, her neighbors never offered any assistance. Faced with utter despair, Annie's will to survive became incredibly strong. She endured 4 hours of brutal treatment before, in spite of the severe pain, she managed to call the police. After the incident, the police discovered a scene of extreme violence and found many valuable pieces of evidence. What they never expected was that solving this case would not only bring justice to Annie, but also inadvertently save 4 innocent children. So, what exactly happened? In Gresham, Oregon, USA, a city located in the northwest of the state, about 16 miles from Portland, with a population of around 110,000. It is a city within Monmouth County and the fourth largest city in Oregon. Annie is the victim, was born on the 20th of October, 81. She is a native of Oregon and grew up in a turbulent family environment. She experienced significant family changes, such as her parents' remarriages and her father's death. However, things did not stop there. Later, Matthew proposed an open marriage, suggesting that Annie join him in intimate activities with other partners. Despite accommodating all of Matthew's requests, their relationship could not be saved. He and they divorced after 4 years in 2013. Annie obtained primary custody of their daughter Alice, while Matthew retained visitation rights for 2 days a week. After the divorce, both Annie and Matthew started new lives. Matthew entered into his third marriage 1 year after the divorce. His new wife Angela was a single mother raising 3 children. Annie also quickly found a new partner, but their relationship was unusual, involving a polygamous arrangement. Although it is unclear why Annie chose this lifestyle, it is clear that she was in a dangerous situation and had become a target for someone with malicious intentions. 3 years after the divorce, a brutal attack occurred. At 2:59 a.m. on the 10th of June 2016, the Monmouth County Police Department received Annie's call for help. She told the officers in a trembling voice that she had been attacked by an assailant and needed immediate medical attention. When the emergency personnel arrived, Annie was still able to speak, but this was merely a reflex. Annie was asleep on the sofa when attacked. It was unlikely she was wearing shoes. So the blood stains at the door were likely left by the perpetrator, while the footprints belonged to Annie. The killer first stabbed Annie with a folding knife. Since the damage caused by the knife was limited, he then ran to the kitchen and grabbed 2 hoes to continue his attack. During this process, Annie tried to escape, but was quickly stopped by the killer. As a result, footprints and blood stains from both of them were found on the floor at the entrance. In addition to these findings, the police also discovered that there were many children's toys in Annie's home. Since no children were found at the scene, they became concerned that Annie might not be the only victim. They immediately contacted Annie's ex-husband Matthew through the Child Welfare Services. Matthew stated over the phone that the day before the incident, he had taken their daughter Alice to his home according to the custody agreement and claimed that he had been with his current wife Angela throughout the time of the crime. His implication was that he was not involved in the case. Obviously, the police were not easily convinced by Matthew, given that he was Annie's ex-husband, and thus the police questioned Annie's ex-husband Matthew and his current wife Angela. Matthew mainly stated 2 things. First, he rarely contacted Annie, and there were no conflicts between them. Second, he had been with his wife Angela throughout the time of the crime, and had never left the residence. However, the police still had doubts about Matthew, especially since he appeared to have difficulty walking when he arrived at the station, as if trying to prove that he was incapable of committing the crime. The police then asked Angela to confirm Matthew's statements and detailed all their activities that night. Although Angela verified his account, the police were still skeptical, given that they were husband and wife and might possibly lie for each other. Nevertheless, it was easy to verify this, as there were 3 tenants living in their house: Angela's ex-husband Aaron, Angela's friend Karina, and another unidentified person. All 3 stated that Matthew could not have committed the crime. Karina, who lived in the garage, even testified that she did not hear any car leaving that night, indirectly proving that no one had left the residence. Given the circumstances, the police had no reason to continue investigating Matthew. Instead, they asked him about Annie's personal life in hopes of finding useful. The police thought this might be a key clue to solving the case. However, the Jameses soon provided alibis, shifting the blame back onto Matthew. According to them, this Matthew had initially not cared about custody of their daughter Alice, so he got along fairly well with Annie after their divorce. To pay the child support on time, Matthew even rented out his house, which is how he met his current wife Angela. But once Matthew married Angela, he seemed to change completely. He stopped paying child support and tried to exclude Annie from having custody of their daughter Alice. For this reason, Matthew sued Annie, claiming that she was unable to care for the child. However, the lawsuit ended in a decisive defeat for Matthew. This partly because he did not have a regular job and mainly relied on government subsidies for his living expenses. On the other hand, his living conditions were extremely poor and did not meet the standards required for raising a child. As a result, Matthew not only failed to regain custody of his daughter through legal proceedings, but also had to pay Anne's legal fees and the back payments in alimony, totaling $42,000 due to the misuse of judicial processes. This could have led her to feel resentful towards Anne. However, after their divorce, his aunt changed the beneficiary to her own mother. Therefore, it was possible that Matthew was unaware of this change and still believed he was the beneficiary, which could have motivated him to kill Anne for financial gain. However, these were just some of the evidence the police had linking Matthew to the case. What really caught their attention was why Matthew had undergone such a dramatic change after marrying Angela, and why, despite their financial difficulties, he insisted on raising their daughter alone. Through further investigation, the police made a horrifying discovery. Everything was related to Angela. According to the investigation, before marrying Matthew, Angela had been in 2 previous marriages and had 3 children. Starting from her second marriage, Angela began using her children as a means of making money. She often gave them inappropriate medications, which eventually caused all 3 children to suffer from various mental illnesses. Through these despicable methods, Angela received thousands of dollars in government disability benefits every month. That was why she was so determined to obtain custody of Matthew's daughter. For Alice, each additional child meant an extra and stable source of income. With these new clues, the police questioned Matthew and Angela again. Matthew's exaggerated behavior clearly showed that he was still trying to create the illusion that there was also strong biological evidence. However, the police only found Angela's DNA among the items collected at the crime scene, and no evidence of Matthew's DNA. As a result, Matthew's arrest was delayed by 3 years and the charge against him was not murder. The main reason was that the police could not find any evidence showing Matthew's direct involvement in the crime, and Angela refused to admit to it. As for Karina, the tenant who testified falsely in Matthew's defense, the police did not hold her accountable due to a lack of evidence. In summary, the police concluded that Angela was the killer in this case, Matthew was an accessory with a lesser role, and Karina was just an incidental figure in the investigation. Based on the evidence they had, the police believed that Angela and Matthew had 3 main motives for committing the crime. First, to obtain custody of Alice and thus receive additional government benefits. Second, to claim Anne's insurance compensation, since Matthew was unaware that Anne had changed the beneficiary. Third, the series of expenses incurred after their unsuccessful lawsuit against Anne had fueled their resentment toward her. To gain more benefits and vent their anger, Matthew and Angela decided to kill Anne. On the night of the crime, Matthew may not, while Angela's 3 children were placed in foster homes.